Hello and welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm Ashley Taradio, Senior Content Strategist at the Women in Retail Leadership Circle. And today I'm joined by Salena Knight, host of the podcast Bringing Business to Retail and founder of the Retail Academy. Today we're going to be chatting about how Salena went from being homeless to helping people build the business of their dreams, how she educates listeners on her podcast about the 5 pillars of retail success, why every successful retail brand starts with a successful CEO, and much more. So Salena, thanks for joining me today.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me on. I have been looking forward to this podcast all day.
We're excited too. So I gave a brief introduction, but can you tell us a little bit more about your journey from, being a stressed out retailer to a consultant who now helps hundreds of other retailers build the stores of their dreams?
It's actually quite a funny story because the store that I built right back in 2007, my first store was an e-commerce business right back when Facebook was brand new. And we have to put frames of reference into this because we forget that back in 2007, we didn't have data on our phones. You could send a text message, but you had to press the 2 button 3 times if you wanted the letter C. But nowadays, we have all of that, and we've kind of forgotten that there was a world without it. So just to put that frame of reference in, that back in 2007, e-commerce was still very, very new. And I started that business. It was a business importing fabrics to make sustainable products. And I started that business because I was pregnant with my daughter, and I'm a bit of a crunchy mama. So I love all things eco and sustainable. And we just couldn't get them here in Australia. We had to buy everything online, and quite often they had to be imported. So I decided to start making a range of my own eco products. We had clothing and reusable nappies, and that just kind of launched me into this e-commerce business. And back then I was making most of my sales on parenting forums. I had a website, but most of the people would just send me private messages and I would send them a PayPal invoice. But before even that, the funny story is I actually don't like children very much. They're nice. I like my own kid and I'll put up with kids, but I'm not like my sister. My sister loves kids to pieces. And so I ended up with a baby store of all things. My original background was as an arborist, so someone who looks after and manages trees. But what I found was I was actually better at growing the businesses that I worked for than I was at cutting trees because I'm actually afraid of heights. So I would be managing teams of people and putting these systems in place. And of course, you don't realize this at the time, but I was putting these systems in place that would just streamline whole departments. And I worked for the government for quite a few years. So you can imagine that doesn't necessarily go down very well because in the government, people have their little place and things move at a steady pace. And I got to the point where my boss pulled me aside and he said to me, you can't be doing this anymore. Like you're actually making the rest of us look bad. And so that was kind of the descent into it's time to go. The final straw was when I had negotiated this really big environmental deal between 5 or 6 different stakeholders to protect this piece of land. And the price to our organization, which was a major organization, was maybe $1,000. And they wouldn't accept it. They were like, no, it has to go. Like, the power lines are going in, it has to go. And I kind of lost it a little bit and said, well, why am I even here? And my boss, he wasn't the best boss, clearly. He literally turned around to me and he said, because the law says you need to be here. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of it then. And so decided that I could either go and work with 2-year-olds or I could work with people who behave like 2-year-olds. So I left that nice cushy corporate job that had my flexi day once a fortnight and a car and nice stable wage and public holidays and sick pay and all those things to venture out into the big wide world of e-commerce and started my first bricks and mortar store right at the beginning of the global financial crisis.
Great timing. But wow, it really sounds like it was a calling for you.
If you had have told me, and I tell the story often about how when I first met my husband, which was back in 2003-4, we went to a financial planner and he sat down with us and he got this great big whiteboard out and he said to me, just write down everything that you want. And it took about 2 hours, and he just kept poking and poking and poking and poking. And it is actually something that I do with my clients now. And he would just poke. He goes, what kind of car do you want? No, tell me the exact model. Right. Okay. And then it was like, do you want a boat? Do you want a horse? Do you want a this? Do you want a that? And he just kept going and filling this board full of stuff. And then he went and put prices next to everything. And he kind of did his math, and he said, right, so if you want the life of your dreams, you need to earn, I think it was $250,000 a year. I'm not a huge thing person. He's like, right, so $250,000 a year, that's like super easy. Now, I was working for the government and earning $70,000 a year. So that was nearly 4 times what I was earning. And I actually said to him, well, do you know what? By the time I'm 30, because I was 27, I think, at the time, by the time I'm 30, I want to be a millionaire. And by the time I'm 40, I want to be able to choose when I work, where I work, and who I work with. And I remember my husband just looking at me and kind of giggling and going, you work for the government. You start at 7, you finish at 4. Like, I can't see how that's going to happen. And look, it did. I'm 45. I have been working with who I want, when I want, where I want for a long time. I was a millionaire by the time I was 30. And it was just that process of having somebody force me to work out what I really wanted that actually made me realize that the dream life that I wanted actually was not that difficult to achieve.
That's amazing. So let's dive right in. How exactly do retailers figure out what's holding them back? And have you seen those challenges have changed or maybe evolved recently as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I don't think it really changes until you start working. So we have a bit of a motto, and I'll PG rate this, but basically it's, if you work on what you're crap at for 90 days, you will see exponential results. And the reason for that is, if you put all of your efforts in, and we could give some examples, like I was talking to a client the other day who wanted to work on sales. And so we worked on sales, we put targets in place. And this is what a lot of people don't do. And we don't tend to put the results that we want. It's kind of like what I was just saying about the dream life. We don't put these targets or results in place because we get a bit scared of, what if I don't meet them? Am I going to be a failure if I don't hit those targets? So one of the key things I'll say is, first of all, whenever you're doing something, make sure you have that end result written down somewhere. But we worked on sales, and she 3x'd her revenue in 3 months. So she was doing more in a month than she was in a quarter by the end of that 3 months. And by the end of 5 months, so we did 2 sales quarters back to back, she was on track to do more than $1 million, and that was about 5x in revenue. All because she had this focus. So how do you work out, the question you asked me was, how do you work out what you're crap at? You probably already know. I mean, I've got a little quiz you can do. It's super fun. There's even a question about cheese. It's like the most fun business audit you have ever seen in your life. It will take you the time it takes for your Mr. Coffee to drip. And it will give you the answer. But most importantly, if you don't want to take the quiz, it's the thing that is always on your to-do list that never gets done. So maybe it's your book work. Maybe it's going out and actually networking with other people. Maybe it's applying for an award. Maybe it is really fine-tuning your marketing. But when you work on the thing that you're actually not good at, and let's be really clear, you personally don't have to do the work. You just have to put the time and the resources and the focus in for it to be worked out. When you put that in place, everything changes, like literally exponentially. And I was talking to the chief growth officer of a really big marketplace just recently. And I said this to him, you just have to do what you're crap at for 90 days and you'll see amazing results. And he said, say that to me again. And I told him, and he said, you just have to wait here. So he went and got the CEO of the company, and he said, listen to what she has to say. And I said, you do what you're crap at for 90 days and you'll see exponential growth. And he said, we are crap at this thing. And the CEO said, yeah, we know that. And I said, well, if you know it, why the heck are you not fixing it? And he said, well, it's a bit difficult. It's just not it's not something that can easily be fixed. And I said, all right, well, tell me this. If you work on what you're good at, how much growth will you see? And he said, oh, our metric, because they have lots of metrics, our metric is somewhere between 1% and 3% growth. I was like, right. And if we work on what you're crap at, what kind of growth would you see? And he said, oh, I could tell you now, easily it'd be 30%. And I said, well, why the heck are you working on the thing that's going to give you 1% growth when you could be working on the thing that's going to give you 30% growth? And he said, because it's difficult. And this is the thing. So working out what you're crap at is probably as simple as the thing that's difficult, the thing that falls off your to-do list, the thing that whenever you are tasked with that job or whenever you have to face that job and give it to somebody else, you end up defaulting to what we call your safe space. And maybe your safe space is creating graphics for the newsletter or posting something on social media, something that you find really easy and safe and comfortable to do. And we find that most business owners will revert back to what we call the safe space when they're faced with anything difficult. And that is where you get stuck in what I call the hamster wheel of hope. And the hamster wheel of hope is where you just get up, you do the things that are on your to-do list, you push those things off that you really don't want to do. You're doing the same thing day in, day out, and you literally just cross your fingers and hope. You hope that you get more clients. You hope that you get more people to your website. You hope that at the end of the week, there's going to be enough money in there to pay your team, to pay you, to pay all the bills. And maybe fingers crossed, there might be something left over. But successful businesses don't work like that. Successful businesses need a CEO. And so I am passionate about turning people from, I call them shopkeepers. It doesn't matter if you've got an online store or a bricks and mortar store, but turning people from shopkeepers who are literally in the weeds, putting stock on shelves, doing all the ordering, posting on social media, into CEOs and making those really big, hard decisions, those decisions that actually give you the growth that you're looking for. Because anyone can make a decision on what to post on social media. That's not really going to grow your business. But saying something like, oh, what's our customer retention strategy? Are we really working on that? What will we need to do to fix that? That is where you're going to see a huge amount of impact. We're really passionate about impact, a huge amount of impact and a huge amount of growth for your business. And let's be honest, if you make more money, it means you're serving more customers. You're making more customers happy. And if you can make more customers happy and fill your bank account and your heart at the same time, I am in a really happy place if we're doing that.
Wow, that was great advice. I'm going to look at my to-do list and see what I've been avoiding.
And just remember, Ashley, you don't have to fix it. You just have to put the resources in to fix it.
Yes. So let's also talk about the 5 pillars of retail success. What exactly are they, and why should retailers pay attention to them? Why are they important?
They are the foundation of fixing these things. So look, I call them the 5 pillars of retail success. I made them up. I work in retail, but honestly, you could put these in place in any business. Our first pillar is money. And we always start with money. It doesn't matter if you're working with me one-on-one. It doesn't matter if you do our program Scale Your Store. But money is the thing that trips a lot of people up. And our money pillar is about understanding money, understanding how it comes in. Where does it go when it's in your business? How does it move around your business? And where does it go when it leaves your business? And so money is going to cover things like, obviously, your profit margin and your cost of goods, but it also covers things like processes. I had one client who, when we worked on her money pillar, she increased her revenue by 30% without selling one extra product. And it was all because of profit. There were just little tiny things in her business. And look, she didn't realize that this was the problem. She thought she needed to sell more. And in fact, if you ever catch yourself saying, we just need to sell more, your problem isn't sales. Your problem is actually money. Because it's easier to make more money when you fix the money pillar than it is to make more sales. Like there's a whole bunch of things that go on in the sales funnel process. It is much easier to make more money when you look at your money pillar. And quite often, especially women, and this is just from my experience, because most of the people I work with, and I've analyzed thousands of retail businesses, women struggle with this concept of money and being okay with being paid really well to do the thing that you love doing. And so one of the things that I teach is quite simply understanding the cyclical nature of money. And going back to what I said earlier, the more money you make It means the more customers you've served. And if you've served more customers, you've made more people happy. So realistically, the more money you make, the more people you make happy. And once people start thinking about money like that, sometimes it's like a light switch goes on and they just understand that making money isn't a bad thing. But we could talk a whole podcast about money. Next up, we have sales, which is the making of the money. That is 100% the sales process. Understanding that is things like understanding your conversion rates. That is looking at whether you have a traffic problem or a conversion problem. Is it people coming in the door, or is it your team aren't making the sales? Maybe you've got 16-year-old people on the floor who are happy to talk to their friends rather than sell. So sales is the making of the money. Next up, we have marketing. Now, marketing is not posting on social media as much as people would love it to be, their whole marketing process. Marketing is about telling the world that your business exists, and there's an and, getting people to want to buy what you sell. So there's two parts of the marketing picture, and quite often we focus on one and not the other. So they have to know you exist, but they also have to want what you're selling. And next up, we have the customer pillar. It's pretty obvious. That is attracting, catching, connecting with, converting, and keeping your customers. And keeping is the bit that people quite often forget about. And we actually have 2 steps after you convert a customer, and we call them the boomerangs. They're the people who come back again and again and again. And then we have your drum beaters. Now, drum beaters are the people who tell everybody about you, but they may not be your best customer. Quite often, drum beaters are highly aspirational. So they love everything that you do. They love everything they sell. Quite often they buy things on sale because they want to be part of your brand, but they can't necessarily afford it right now. So never forget the drum beaters. And then we have impact. So we've had money, sales, customers, marketing, and then impact. And impact is what I call the missing pillar. Impact is when you build a brand rather than a store. If you took all your products away, people would still buy what you sold. You could say, I'm releasing this thing, and it's Apple. People would line up to have this thing, even though they have no idea what it is. And impact is quite often the thing that got a lot of people through COVID because they built a community around what it is that they sell and why they sell it. So the product is kind of an afterthought. It's the why you sold it in the first place that people resonate with. Some brands capitalize on this really well. Social enterprises are really good at capitalizing on it. But quite often, and again, this comes down to women because we don't like to toot our own horn. Quite often the brands that I work with, because I work with independent brands, they started for a reason. They wanted to change the world. They saw a gap in the market. They created a product that didn't exist, but they forget to tell the world that they're there, and forget to tell the world that they might want this thing. And so that's the marketing side. But the impact is, how are you going to change people's lives? And quite often people go, well, my product can't. But I can tell you now, the 7-Eleven changes my life sometimes. When I really need a drink and I'm in the middle of the city and I know that place is open, it's only a really tiny little thing, but it makes me happy to know I can go in there, I can get a soda, I can get a water, and I can walk back out again. I don't have to go to the supermarket, go up and down 27 aisles, wait in line. I just walk in, get my thing, walk out. It makes me happy. And so understanding that impact pillar and really leveraging it is important, especially for independent businesses. Like, it is so important. But if it is not the thing that is holding you back, then it's not time to focus on it just yet. Quite often the thing that's holding independent businesses back is money, sales, or marketing. That's the 3 big things. And honestly, sales and marketing, they're the things that we should be working on anyway. But the impact pillar is one that I do think you should spend a little bit of time, 1 quarter every single year, focusing on, because that's going to be the thing that turns you into an overnight success that might take 10 years.
Wow. So you're so right. We could have an episode for each pillar. There's so much content there.
If people are interested, not that I'm supposed to be pitching, but if people are interested, we do go through each pillar. There is a lot inside of each pillar. So in our program, Scale Your Store, we actually go through each pillar, and then we give people strategies to implement. So something like sales, we talk about how to leverage it. But then we say, okay, here are sales strategies. It might be pre-selling, it might be bundling, it might be collaborations. And so having those strategies in place are really important, because going back to focusing on the thing that you're crap at, in 90 days, which is how we work, you can't do more than one, maybe two projects, because it will often take 4 to 6 weeks to get something in the mix. If you're going to do a really good promotion, it's going to take you at least 4 to 6 weeks to do it. And so that first part of the 90 days is quite often just putting the things in place to get the results that you want. The action, which is where we tend to default to, because especially if you're the founder or the CEO and the visionary, we like to take action. We don't like all the detail that sits in the middle. And so we just kind of put some things together and then we just want to rush to the end. And so one of the things I will say is, when you are focusing on the thing that you're crap at, be really realistic about what you and your team, or you and the resources that you have, can achieve, because you are going to get better results doing one thing excellently than you are trying to do 3 or 4 things haphazardly.
Great. So, Salena, looking ahead, I'd love to know what trends you're predicting for the retail industry in 2021, or what you're excited to see in retail over the next few years.
I've been to a couple of retail conferences just recently, and everybody is talking about VR goggles. I don't know, maybe not. I think one of the things that we cannot afford to overlook is personalization. And I know that there's been a huge change just recently with the iOS 14 update, and being able to give that personalization to that's just happened recently, but being able to give that personalization to our customers. But yet every study that you can find will tell you that customers only want to see products and content that are relevant to them. We are inundated with so much noise. We don't want to have to filter it ourselves. And so even though there's this fine line between privacy and personalization, customers want to see what is relevant. And so I don't think that's going away. I think you need to be really targeted when you do your marketing and your advertising. If you're sending out emails, start personalizing them with even just first names, or we use products that will personalize products inside of email marketing. And that's important because you need to keep customers engaged. And we're not necessarily even talking about social media here, but you need to keep customers engaged with your brand. And if you're giving everybody the same piece of information, it's just not going to click. They're going to get that fatigue of too many things. Right now, we're seeing a downward trend in email open rates. And I think that's because so many people are working from home. They're getting so many more emails. The conversation that you would have just had over the water cooler is now coming in via Slack or Asana or Monday or via email. And so email open rates are going down, but that will change. Like, people will get to the point where they're ready to open more emails again. So you have to be consistent. But personalization is the one thing that I don't think is going away. And the other one that I think we tend to forget is that people like to hang out with people, that impact, that community. And independent brands can do this so much better than enterprises. Enterprises might have more money and more people, but building that connection with your customers, that is what people are searching out. And we've seen that a lot with this trend to shop local and to shop independent. People want to help out their community. They want to be part of a village. It doesn't be, no matter how big a town you live in, we are craving that human connection right now. So what can you do, preferably with a little bit of personalization, what can you do to bring that human element into your business?
Well, Salena, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Women in Retail Talks and sharing your amazing insight with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I could talk forever.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at womeninretail.com for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.